I have an expiring term life policy. What should I do? How do I evaluate if I need another policy to replace it?
So term life just means that you have life insurance for a certain period. So 10 years, 5 years, 15, 20. Uh, the idea behind a term life policy is that you're trying to cover a problem,
Yeah,
whatever
a
that
risk
is.
that whatever risk you want to cover is going to go away eventually.
Yeah, you got little kids, you want to make sure that there's money there. Someday they're going to be big kids, maybe they don't need as much money. Then you might get a 10 or 15-year policy or something or
Yeah,
whatever.
or you're 20 years away from retirement and you
Right.
just want to make sure that your family still has replaces your income by having that life policy.
That's right. That's right. And so, exactly, and you don't have the assets to maybe replace the income right now. So life insurance would bring in those assets upon your demise, right? And so also term insurance tends to be less expensive than what I would call permanent insurance. And there's a lot of different versions of that. And so what happens though is at the end of, let's say, that 10 or 15 or 20-year period, it expires, sort of. You can still keep it,
Yep.
at least in the cases I've seen, and I'm sure there's something out there that would refute that, but every case I've seen, there's some option to keep it. But they bring up the price pretty dramatically in order to keep it.
Yeah, essentially each year they give you a new premium that they reassess. Because they're not going to, but the nice thing is they're not checking your health. So,
Yeah.
so
If you're really sick and there's a possibility that you might pass away, and even though they're raising the cost per year, maybe double or more or whatever it is that you're paying, right?
yeah,
It probably might be worth it in case something happens. It protects your family. That's probably the only scenario I can think of where it's worth it to pay because it's usually quite a bit more. Most of the times you're better off going out into the open market and just getting another 10-year policy or what have you.
yeah.
Um,
The one thing that is are there underlying health issues that
Yeah.
will prevent you from getting a new policy?
That's right. And I mean, that's where it gets to be a bit of a catch-22. So, you developed cancer or something in that time frame, and maybe they don't, maybe it's still going on, and nobody wants to cover you, or if they did, it would be ridiculously expensive. And so now your term insurance policy is expiring, but they're charging a lot more too, and you can't get another policy if you let it drop. And so then it just becomes an issue of what are they charging you, and what are your needs?
Yeah.
Are the needs really there or not? Is it because sometimes these life insurance policies are sort of luxuries for a lot of our clients. They've got a lot of assets. So yeah, what to do with an expiring term life insurance policy? Essentially, the insurance company wants you to stop paying.
Yep.
And so they're raising that rate there. But there may be some situations where you want to keep paying. Most of the times, you're going to get a new policy or just let it drop.
So what would you be looking for to evaluate? Do I need another policy?
Well, yeah, that's where you look at, I mean, pretty straightforward. You can do an estate plan and take a look at, 'cause I'm in the middle of that right now for myself. And just, I want to make sure there's liquidity there, because there's a house and all these things. And I don't want, them to have to sell that house. And, I think they get 9 months or whatever the number is. And so I want to provide liquidity for that situation from an estate standpoint. And that's a more of a permanent policy issue because, as it goes on for the rest of my life. So that's what you want to do. You want to analyze, why the policies need. Are you trying to cover a mortgage? Are you trying to cover your kids? Are you trying to cover your shortfall in income if you pass away before you've built up your assets? All of these different types of things. That's what I'd be looking at to try to figure that out.
Yeah, and so if you're heading into retirement, maybe it's a mortgage that's going to be slowly declining, and so maybe you have 5-10 years left on that mortgage. Maybe you get a 5-10 year policy for that.
Yep.
Hopefully your kids are grown up and you don't need to be providing for them, but sometimes you want a small bit for liquidity's sake. Then you could get a smaller policy.
Right. And some of the smaller policies are a lot easier to qualify for, too. So, there's some options as far as that goes. But it's a good question. It's not an easy answer because it's extremely variable depending on the situation. And one thing you got to be really, really careful of, especially in our position, is telling somebody that they should discontinue a policy only to have maybe that person pass away and the spouse realizing, wow, if we just kept it for another few months or whatever, I would have gotten X amount of dollars. So do be careful with this analysis, that's for sure.
Yeah. Also, sometimes even though it's a money thing, there is some psychological and peace
Yep.
of mind that
Yep.
you have to consider too.
Sure.
That's an expense.
Peace of mind's critical. We spend lots of money on peace of mind and trying to, mental health, and that's what vacations are. They're not free either, So to me, insurance as a whole is sort of like vacation in a weird sense that just makes me feel a little bit better and secure about the situation, either for myself or for my family if I'm not here, whether it's life insurance or car insurance or earthquake insurance or whatever. All of those you have to do a little calculation to figure out what it's worth, but they all bring some potential peace of mind. So that's what's important too.